Okay, so where we left it last time was there are these large questions about what language is, what kind of thing it is, how it works, and I said let's try and home in on simple, concrete questions, as simple and concrete as we can make it. And I said, well, what a language is, the core of what a language is. Aha. Hard to read like that, isn't it? Okay, the core of what a language is that there are sentences in the language that can be right or wrong. You've got something that's got sentences in it that can be right or wrong. Then it's not music. It's not some communication system that's more primitive than language. It's a language. So long as you have sentences in it that are capable of going right or wrong, and those sentences are made up out of words, and what the words stand for plays a role in fixing what it takes for the sentences to go right or wrong. So if you take a sentence like Sally is tall, you have the Sally part referring to Sally, you have the is tall part saying something about Sally, that she's tall. And you can understand how that works. This is where language begins. This is the very simplest case. What's going on there? How does the name get hooked up to the object in the first place? If we can understand how it happens that names refer to objects, so the sign gets hooked up to the thing, then we'll understand something about how it can be there are standards of rightness and wrongness governing the use of sentences, statements involving names. Then we'll have got somewhere with understanding how language works. So what we need to understand first, this is the strategy, this is the way in, is how it can be that the elements of a sentence, the basic words that you're using, how they can refer to the objects around you. What sets up that connection? How is it that words can refer to things? And so what we're going to do today is look at Frege's strategy for addressing that question. Those first, incidentally, in the reading I said the first 6 pages of the Frege. What I mean is the first 6 pages of, how should I put this, the original text. The first 3 pages of the reader. Do you see what I mean? My apologies if you read the first 12 pages of the original text. That's far too much, actually. Let me just say something about these pages we're looking at. We'll be looking at the argument here today, we'll be looking at it in the next lecture, and we'll look at it in the lecture after that, and then we might move on a bit. So we're going to have a very sustained focus on those pages. This is quite restrained. At UCLA, in their philosophy of language classes, it was for a long time a tradition that you spend the entire semester on those first 6 pages of the Frege. They are where analytic philosophy begins, and they really repay a lot of study. And the kind of format you should look at is, you read the 6 pages, I hope everyone's had at least a look at them by now. You read the 6 pages, you come to lecture, you read the 6 pages again. You go to section, you discuss the 6 pages. You go back, what do? You read the 6 pages again. Right, you just keep repeating like that. They bear a lot of thinking about. They are put with great clarity, but the point that's being made there is a very subtle one. And what I'll do today is try and put it in a preliminary way, set out what the point is. So Frege starts out with a distinction between informative and uninformative identities. Then he says that shows that there's such a thing as the sense of a sign. And it's the sense of a sign that fixes what the sign stands for. So this notion of sense is going to be that explains how it is that words can refer to things. That's a strategy. So to start with, we need something about this distinction: informative and uninformative identities. Frege says A is identical to A. All these quotes come from, actually, mostly from the first page and a half of that Frege article. A is identical to A, holds a priori, and according to Kant, is to be labelled analytic. Well, statements of the form A is identical to B very often contain very valuable extensions of our knowledge and cannot always be established a priori. So analytic, a priori. How many of you guys know what a priori means? Pretty good. Not all, but not bad. What about analytic? Okay, so the idea of a priori is you know it's true just by thinking about it. You don't need to look to see. So if I say the cap on the waiting list will be removed, is that a priori? That is not a priori. You could not tell that just by figuring it out. You had to wait for me to give you the good news right now. Actually, I heard this before in class, that I think it's likely that the cap on the waiting list will be removed. But you could not have told that just by figuring it out, right? Whereas, if you take something like my sister's son is my nephew, is that a priori? Yeah, you can do that just figuring out my sister's son. Yeah, that's right. It's not that hard. 7 times 7 is 49. I mean, it wasn't my day. It's still 49, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And you do that just by figuring it out. Okay? There. Analytic means you can tell just by knowing what its meaning is, whether it's true. If you know the meaning of the statement, you know it's true. Bachelors are unmarried. You know the meanings of the words, you can just figure out that's got to be right. The meanings of the words make it true. Whereas if you take something like the class is in 126 barrels, for that you have to look at the website. The meanings of the words doesn't tell you. Okay? So Frege says, take a statement like the morning star is the morning star, a priori or not. You think that's it? Put your hand up if you think that's a priori. Very good. Any dissent? Very good. Right. The evening star is the evening star. Analytic or not? Analytic. Okay. So these are pretty easy stuff. I tell you the morning star is the morning star. All right. What else have you got to say? The evening star is the evening star. Okay. What about the morning star is the evening star? The brightest star you see in the morning is the brightest star you see in the evening. Analytic or a priori? I mean, what I mean is it analytic or a priori? I mean, what, is it on the one hand analytic, a priori, or not analytic and not a priori? It's not analytic, not a priori. Okay, so that's informative if you're told the morning star is the evening star. If you're told this heavenly body is this heavenly body, that's a posteriori. It's not a priori, not analytic, right? So the idea here is your take, it's something like you've got a take on the object here. You've got one way of being presented with that object here, and you've got a different way of being presented with that object here. And if the object's shown to you in different ways, then it's going to be informative. It's going to be not a priori to be told it's the same thing. Whereas if I just say to you, this thing is this thing, if I show it to you the same way 2 times, then it's not going to be informative to be told it's the same thing. You see what I mean? Yeah? So there's that notion of your take on the object. If your take on the object is the same, then it's not going to be informative to be told it's the same thing. If you've got a different take on the object 2 times, then it is going to be informative to be told it's the same thing. Yeah?
Does that mean that all analytic statements are a priori, but not all a priori?
For the moment, I'm just taking it that all normally analytic statements are a priori. But what Frege just says is just if it's uninformative, we're going to say priori and according to Kant, analytic. And if it's uninformative, then it's neither. Sorry, if it's informative, then it's neither. There are deep issues in the theory of exactly what analytic and a priori mean. Yeah, and questions about how you generalize that framework. But for the moment, we're just taking it as the same thing. Okay, just one more excerpt. Just one more exercise here. Consider this building. Okay, this building. I give you the identity. Is this building this building? Is this building this building? That's okay, right? That's okay. Is this building? Now watch me very closely here. Is this building the same as this building? No. Yeah. No. This is not the same. Actually, it is the same. This is actually my garden shed. But if you look very carefully, you can see this is the side here. That's that there. Yeah. Okay. So that was informative. I don't say I get any great prize for this, but I knew something you didn't there. Right? I told you this is the same thing as that thing, and that was informative. Right? So I showed you the same thing 2 different ways, and it was informative to be told it's the same thing. Okay? One last example. Here's Frege again. The discovery that the rising sun is not new every morning, but always the same, was one of the most fertile astronomical discoveries. I once saw a cartoon illustrating this point that had 2 cavemen looking at the setting sun, and one of them is saying to the other, you know, there's a big pile of them down over there. Right, so that they hadn't got it. It's the same one going round and round. You see what I mean? It's the same thing. So that was a step forward to realise it's the same sun you're getting today as you were yesterday. A friend of mine was a pinball addict when he was a teenager, and pinball? Okay, some of you know what pinball is. And he thought that that when you loaded up a new ball, it really was a new ball. So that you could buy balls, he thought, well, there must be a whole stack of them down there. And he didn't realise it was the same ball going round and round again and again. Right? So that's informative to be told it's the same ball going round again and again. Okay, so is that okay about informative and uninformative identities? This is your chance to pause if that's not absolutely rock solid what that distinction is. Okay, we can do that. Okay. So Frege says, given you got this distinction between informative and uninformative identities, you need a notion of sense. And this is how the argument goes. You get the sign, and you have the object that the sign stands for. You have Sally, the name Sally, and you have the person Sally. And in between the 2, you have the sense of the sign. Someone actually said to me in office hours today, look, if I have a name like, if you have a name like Barack Obama, then the meaning of the sign, all there is to the meaning of the sign is the object you're talking about. The name is a tag for the object. That's what the name is. That's how the name works. The tag is the object. Frege is saying, no, there is this other thing, the sense of the sign. So why do you need that? If you're discussing the way that names function in a language, what is a name after all? A name is just a tag for a thing. If you get the name tagging the thing, that's all there is to the meaning of the tag, to the meaning of the name. It's just a tag for a thing. Frege says, no. Well, why is that? Why couldn't you have it that it's just a sign and a reference? And after all, if you did have a language where the names were just hooked up to objects and nothing in between, wouldn't that be all you need? you could then go on and talk about the things around you and make remarks about them and so on. Well, the argument is, if identity was a relation between what names designate, then A is identical to B, and A is identical to A would say just the same thing. So what he's saying is, I want a piece of, well, I don't know if we should try working in the corners here. Okay, what he's saying is, suppose you take the name A and the name B, and suppose that A is just a tag for an object, and suppose that B is just a tag for the very same object, the morning star, the evening star. They both just tag the same thing, planet Venus. Then A just stands for Venus, B just stands for Venus, so they have just the same meaning. They tag just the same object. So A is identical to B would be saying just the same thing as A is identical to A. So take the morning star is the morning star. You've got a tag here for this planet, Venus, you've got a tag here for Venus, you've got a tag here for Venus, and you've got another tag here for Venus. What's the difference between these two? You just replaced one tag for Venus with another tag for Venus. So there's no difference in what objects you're talking about. So how can it be that they say different things, those two sentences? The morning star is the morning star, and the morning star is the evening star. They must be saying different things, because is this one informative? We know the answer to that. It's not informative. The morning star is the morning star. Come on. We were doing so well on this about 5 minutes ago. The morning star is the morning star. Is that informative?
No.
No. Okay, the morning star is the evening star. Is that informative?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. But look, this is like a trick. Because how did I get from something uninformative to something informative? I took a sign that refers to the planet Venus, and I replaced it with another sign that refers to the planet Venus. So there shouldn't be any difference between these two. If all there is the sign and the object, I took one sign that refers to an object, I took a different sign that refers to the same object, and I just replaced this one with that one. I didn't make any difference to the sentence. You see what I mean? So how did I get from something informative, from something uninformative to something informative? That is the puzzle. There must be more to meaning than reference. You might say, Frege says, maybe what's going on is, when you say the morning star is the morning star, and the morning star is the evening star, what you really mean is, when I say to you the morning star is the morning star, what I'm saying is, take the sign, the morning star, and take this other sign, the morning star. They stand for the same thing. And take this sign, the morning star, and take that sign, the evening star, and say they stand for something different. So really what I'm talking about here is about signs. When I say the morning star is the morning star, that looks like a statement about the planets, but actually it's a statement about language. That's one theory. Yeah, and then they're going to be saying different things, because they're talking about different signs. Yeah? So this is Frege. What is intended to be said by A is identical to B is that the signs A and B designate the same thing. So that the signs themselves are what's under discussion. A relation between the signs is what's being asserted. So if you take an identity statement, you're actually talking about language, you're talking about science. That's one theory. Yep. And Frege says that can't be right, that theory. And this is his objection to the theory. He has two objections to the theory. One objection is, when you say the sign A refers to this object and the sign B refers to that object, that relation holds only insofar as you've got signs here standing for things, but what sign stands for what thing is arbitrary. Any sign can stand for any object. But that's how languages work. You can have arbitrarily any sign standing for any object. So I'd just be telling you then about this arbitrary fact that the sign, the morning star, stands for the same thing as the sign, the morning star, and the sign, the morning star, stands for the sign, stands for the same thing as the sign, the evening star. And here's, well, nobody can be forbidden to use any arbitrarily producible event or object as a sign for something. And that's right, I can say, suppose this is the White House and this is the Pentagon, right? You can do that. You can't say, no, you can't talk about the White House and the Pentagon like that. You can't, I'll do it if I like. Nobody can be forbidden to use any arbitrarily producible event or object as a sign for something. But then you'd be saying, well, when you say the morning star is the evening star, you're not referring to the subject matter. You're not talking about the heavenly bodies. You're only talking about the bits of language. And you express, he puts it, no proper knowledge by that means. I was talking to someone this morning about this kind of example. This happened a few years ago. There was a quasar. There were a pair of quasars. Let's call them quasar A and quasar B. Far off in deep space somewhere. And the two quasars were quite close together and with producing light of very similar spectra. And this was a real puzzle because you don't usually get that. And it was eventually found that, well, what was going on is there's just one quasar. There was a black hole in between it and us, and light from it was being bent around the black hole. So we discovered quasar A is quasar B. Right? Now the thing is, that's what Frege is calling proper knowledge there. When you discover that quasar A is the same as quasar B, you're actually finding out something about astronomy. You're finding out something about the way the world is. You're not finding out something about the way the English language works. So he's saying, when you take the sentence A is identical to B, that's got to be a remark about the world. When you find out that Batman is Bruce Wayne, that's right. You guys know about Batman, right? Okay, I guess this is one of these legends that persists in every time in every society. Okay, when you find out that Batman is Bruce Wayne, that is a fact about the world. That is not a fact about the English language. The evening star is the morning star. That is a fact about astronomy. It is not a fact about the English language. If you said it is a fact about language, you'd actually obliterate the distinction between informative and uninformative identities. Because suppose I've told you, look, this sign A refers to the same thing, as this sign A. Is that informative or uninformative? Uninformative. It's not actually, if you think about it, because you could use the same sign twice to refer to different people. That happens, right? You have two friends called Bill, and you say, my God, I can't believe what I just heard. Bill said to Bill that, right? You can do that. You can use the same sign twice to refer to different people. Yeah? And in fact, actually, ordinarily, if you said, well, Bill said to Bill, you'd assume that there were two Bills involved. If it was one and the same Bill, you'd say, well, Bill said to himself. Are you with me? So, A refers to the same thing as A would be informative, and A refers to the same thing as B would be informative. So actually everything would turn out to be informative in this theory. So how can it be there's a difference between an informative and an uninformative identity? Here's Frege's punchline. The difference can arise only if the difference between the signs A and B, corresponds to a difference in the mode of presentation of that which is designated. So the point is that when you get the sign A, there's a take on the object, a way of getting onto the object, a perspective on the object that A expresses. When you get the sign B, there is another take, a way of getting onto that object that B expresses. And if they're different, then the identity is informative. If they're the same, then the identity is uninformative. But you need that notion of the mode of presentation, the way you're giving the thing, your perspective on the object. If you go back to that thing about the shed, the whole point about the shed there was you get different ways of being presented with the shed in these two photos. And so long as you've got a difference in the way it's being presented, then you're going to have an informative identity. So in the analysis of signs that stand for objects, you need three things. There's the sign itself, there's the sense of the sign, and there's the object the sign stands for. There's the take that the sign expresses on the object. And you need that if you're going to explain how come there's this difference between informative and uninformative identities. That's why you need a notion of sense. It's important we all be absolutely, as happy in the word I want, comfortable with that. If you're not feeling comfortable, then please try and express your discomfort. Yeah.
I think in the reading, Frege also uses, in the same sentence, he uses the word sense, and then he also uses context. So could we
also use the word sense and the word
context?
Context.
Before I was thinking of sense in the word and like context or like relationship. And then he, in one sentence, he uses both words. So I'm taking that he is making a distinction between them.
Do you have the passage?
Yeah.
Let me make just one remark about that while you're looking it up. There's a sense in which context is obviously going to be important. Look, suppose you take my way of being given the table right now, yeah? And then suppose that the discussion after the class goes on and on. Tomorrow morning, I wake up with my head underneath the table. I'm looking up at the base of the table, the table from underneath. Then I'm in a different context with respect to the table, right? So I lie there thinking, where am I? You could be practically anywhere, right? I'm getting a different take on the table because my context with respect to it has shifted. Right? Whereas if I stand here and I'm in the same context with respect to the table twice, then my identity there is going to be uninformative. So those would be different modes of presentation because of the difference in context. But I think that's what. Have you found it? Okay, we'll have to. Yeah. Yeah.
Is the sense just the characteristics that you're using as kind of the markers that attach it to the name, or is it something different?
All I've said is, what I've done so far is, I said there's this distinction between informative and uninformative identities. Right? And I say we're going to use sense as the name for, sense is just a word for whatever it is. When you've got the same sense, the identity is uninformative. When you have a different sense, it's informative. Right? That's all I've done so far, except I gave some kind of pictures or impressions as to that notion of a take or a way of being given. but I haven't said anything at all more detailed about what the sense is or how it works. So what I've said so far has been very abstract, plus a bit of metaphor. You can think about the close photographs and so on. Yeah. And the next step is to get more detailed and say, what is it? How does it work? How does a sense hook up to a sign? Yeah. And that's really what we'll be doing in the first 6 weeks of the class, actually, is trying to fill this out. But at the moment, we're just trying to triangulate where the phenomenon of interest is. You see what I mean? Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So he's saying, to every expression belonging to a complete totality of signs, there should certainly correspond a definite sense. But natural languages often do not satisfy this condition, and one must be content if the same word has the same sense in the same context.
Yeah.
So I took what you were saying to be like, if we had like perfect language, then every word that has different sense, you would have a separate word for each of those sense. But in our natural language, which is not perfect, we have to settle for if one word has the same sense in the same context. So I guess it seems like he's drawing a distinction between context and sense. So I'm just curious what it would look like when those two come apart.
What he means there is something that is relatively superficial. It's that, I don't know, for example, I used to work at a university where there were 3 John Campbells. Yeah, I mean, very upsetting and distressing. I once got an incredibly steamy love letter, but I really was thinking, who the hell is this? And eventually had to sellotape over the envelope and say, open it that up, mail it on to someone else. So there you have the same name being used with different senses, different references. Yeah. And what is distressing about that kind of case is you have sentences, you have the same name being used with the same sense in the same context, namely in the context of the postal system. Sorry, the same name being used with different senses in the context of the local postal system. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's bad enough if there is someone on the other side of the planet with the same name as me. Yeah, but so long as we are not using the name in the same context, it doesn't matter. Yeah, but once you bring two names once you bring the same name being used in 2 different senses into the same context, then the possibility for confusion is very great, and that's what he's saying there. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't think of sense as context.
No, they're completely different from that. Yeah. Okay. And it's different again to the thing I was talking about before. Okay? Okay. And here's the move, here's the main move that Frege makes in these first few pages. That thing about informative and uninformative, that's a very kind of technical question. Right? That would not have occurred to you, I suggest, straight off as really the base problem that you're interested in when you're interested in how language works. It's a very subtle kind of technical phenomenon in that. But Frege's great move is we're trying to understand how it is that the words in a sentence can refer to the objects around us. This is the big problem. This is the fundamental problem. How is it that words can refer to things? And Frege has just been arguing that in order to explain how you got this distinction, that is really, it might be a little bit technical, but it's definitely there. It's a real distinction between informative and uninformative identities. In order to explain that distinction, you need this notion of sense. You need that notion of your way of getting onto the object. And the sense, he says, that's the mode of presentation of the object. Sense is what explains informativeness. That's how we came in. But then Frege's move is to say, sense is what fixes reference. the thing that explains informativeness is what hooks up the sign to the object. That's how the sign gets tied up to the object, by being associated with a sense. So just to go back over that, when you take the morning star as the morning star, the sameness of sense has to be making that identity uninformative, right? If you get the same sense there, it's going to be uninformative to be told that the morning star is the morning star. You get the same take both times. It's got to be, it's the same object. But then sameness of sense has got to guarantee sameness of reference. You get the same sense, it must be, you get the same object there. So sense has got to be fixing reference. This is what's great about the frigate, is that all the pieces here are individually very simple, but we really seem to be getting on to how it is that the sign gets hooked up to the thing in the world. It's this notion of sense, and we need that notion of sense. Sense is going to be what explains how the name gets tied up to the thing. And that's how it works when you have a sentence that you say, take the general term, is tall or shiny or whatever it is. Then, if you get a sentence, the morning star is shining brightly, whether that's true is going to depend on whether that general term is shining brightly is true of that object. So we're going to get something here about what it takes for a sentence to be correct or incorrect. How there can be sentences that are going right or wrong. So long as we've got terms that are expressing senses and thereby getting hooked up to objects, then we're going to have sentences that can be true or false. So the key thing is to figure out how sense operates. We already know something. The regular connection between a sign, its sense, and its reference is of such a kind that to the sign there corresponds a definite sense, and to that in turn a definite reference, while to any given object there is not only a single sign. So the sign should be, in any one context anyway, the sign should be expressing a particular sense, just one sense, and in that sense is hooking up the sign to the object. That's how it works. Okay. We will go further into the theory of sense next time, but in the meantime, what is it that you do now? You do the reading! Okay. And every time you do it, a bit more will come into focus. Okay, thank you.